Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Thorne, and welcome back to witnessing the slow death of my career as a respected journalist. It is the Australian Aviation Podcast. Joining me in this circus, as ever, is our chief clown / senior journalist, Jake Nelson. Jake, welcome to the show.
I mean, given that you're the editor, Adam, wouldn't you be the chief clown?
I'm like the clown master.
The clown master.
Is that
That's even better. That's even better than chief clown. The clown master. Now, I believe the term you're looking for in a circus is ringmaster.
Yes.
But clown master, you've said it now, and you can't back out of it.
The clown master.
Yeah.
God, that's a horror show, isn't it? Right.
It's like an obscure Doctor Who villain.
No, it is. Yeah. No, I could see that.
It's like, the master regenerates into a clown one time for some reason.
No. I actually get most of those references because I do know Doctor Who. I do understand. Right, we got any shout outs before we start attempting to talk some sense?
Yeah, so we did have a comment on our podcast from
Was
a couple of weeks
one?
back. Oh, yes, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It was from at Burnster787 on YouTube,
Nice.
who said, "Hey, I'm 14, wanting to do pilot training. If anyone wants to fund, I'm a regular listener. Can I get a shout out?" So shout out to you at Burnster787. We don't know who you are, but if anyone is looking to fund pilot training for a 14-year-old fan of Australian aviation, that's their username.
Is there any way that how do we actually give this person money? Is there any details?
Well, no. Just at Burnster787.
But
so
what is that? Is that an Instagram handle?
That's their YouTube username.
Oh, I see, the YouTube handle.
And
I quite like that. You've got to admire the initiative. It's no like, here's why I should get the money or why I'm a deserving case. You're just like, I want your money.
Well, they've got a few.
Okay.
They've got a couple of videos up. There's one on approach and landing at Sydney Airport in a Boeing 777. So they've put that on their channel. They've got a couple of shorts up on their channel. A330 at Toronto Pearson. Footage of a Jetstar A320 at Sydney Airport. And so Burnster787 is...
What I would say to you, Burnster787...
Burnster787.
Right, if you are watching, look, we're happy to help you get some money for the lessons and stuff. But you got to meet us halfway, right? Get back in touch with us. Tell us a little bit more about how you got into flying, why you love it, all that kind of stuff. And then give us some contact details. So if people do want to give you money, then they can do. Like, you'd be really bad. What do they call them in Australia? They call them chuggers, don't they? Charity muggers. And they're people that come up to you and...
Potentially?
Yeah, but they call them chuggers. That's the thing, right? So people that come up to you and ask you to give to charity. So they've obviously got a bit of patter, better technique, which is fair enough. That's what you need. If you want people to give you money, you've got to make it easy for them. So I would say we got to work on that a little bit.
And I mean, there's plenty of places out there that are offering flight training. Of course, in a few years' time, you could look at places like Sydney Flight College or a number of other aviation schools around the country. Look at your local aero clubs, your local pilots clubs, and see how you go, Burnster.
Yeah, no, well, good luck to you. But get back in touch with us, and we'll pick this up next week.
One person you could look to as an example, Hayden McDonald,
yes.
the young pilot who last year flew a fantastic odyssey around Australia, to raise. To educate people on the autism spectrum and to help lobby for autism and neurodivergent people to be more fairly considered in the aviation industry. Noble goal, and congratulations to Hayden. And of course, our Young Pilots of the Year at the Australian Aviation Awards. We've celebrated some wonderful young pilots.
We have indeed.
Over the years.
There you go. Loads of ideas there.
We've also had a comment on this was on our podcast 2 weeks ago from at Othy.
Sorry, what? Say that again.
From at Othy.
Right.
Who put a timestamp, 16 minutes and 4 seconds, and said, skip to here if you're looking for the conversation that matches the title of the episode.
That's horrible, isn't it? So basically, when we have this hilarious banter and stuff, they're literally if you want to cut this out and just get straight to the news, this is
it's
what
a fair point.
Yeah,
it is a fair point.
Yeah.
And of course, we have to shout out the wonderful people at Virgin Australia, don't we?
Yes, we did. They were very nice to us this week. We went to visit Virgin Australia, and they showed us around the hangar. Special shout out to James and Hrdlicka who kind of organised it and were very, very lovely to us. A lot of people recognise Jake, I've got to say. I
have one of those faces.
Yeah, people were like, are you Jake from the podcast? Oh my God. Nobody said that to me. No one cares about me.
Well,
It's
I mean,
become
presumably, if I'm there, so are you. You know.
Yeah, but the problem is that essentially you are the star of this show, and I'm just like setting you up. Like nobody cares about me. I am the clown master.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Adam.
Yeah.
You are the clown master.
Yeah.
You know, the master of all the clowns.
Yes.
Both of the clowns, I guess. You're also the master of yourself, which is there's probably a self-help book in there somewhere.
But no, thank you very much for showing us around. Go on.
And yeah, thank you to everyone who showed us around the hangar and the Integrated Operations Centre at Virgin Australia.
Which was my favourite bit. So the Integrated Operations Centre, for those that aren't aware, and I'm sure I'm downplaying it or getting it slightly wrong, but these are the people that effectively dispatch the aircraft. They're the ones that effectively deal with cancellations and delays. They are, you put it best, it's like the nerve centre.
Yeah, they handle the crew requirements. Yep. They handle the slots. They talk to the airports. All of these things. It was just a hive of activity when we were there.
And they've got a screen, and it's basically got like every flight that day is like little blocks. And then they've got this kind of godlike view of everything. And they're the ones that are trying to shuffle everything around so that everything works. And it's one of those jobs that is kind of exciting and stressful every day, because every day something's going wrong. There might be a weather incident. There might be a cancellation.
There might be a very important Australian aviation journalist looking to get back to Sydney.
Yes. So but one of the funny things is, and I'm not sure if they were joking or not, but you remember a couple of months ago, Jake's flight was cancelled from Canberra?
It was from Melbourne to Sydney.
From Melbourne to Sydney, and the only flight that they could get Jake on was like 2 days later.
2 days later, yeah.
And Jake actually met the person that made that decision.
Well, I said, you know, is the person who made that decision there, and they pointed to someone, but I don't know if that was a joke or not.
No, but it could well be, because that person would have been in that room.
Could possibly be. We also saw their simulators.
Yeah, which was amazing. So basically, when you actually see the simulators, right, it is like something out of War of the Worlds, because you've got these enormous, great boxes from the outside, and then they've got these like huge like legs that kind of move around. But when you actually go into the simulator, it looks like you are exactly in the aircraft, because obviously you've got all the buttons and stuff are the same, but they've simulated like the weather and stuff. It just looks real. Like, it looks absolutely incredible. So these are incredible pieces of kit. And it's interesting because before Virgin had access to be simulated, I think there was Brazil, they were flying people around the world, because obviously you have to do simulator time. So now they've got this resource back in Australia, makes things a lot easizer.
We got to see inside the 7800, the 737-800 simulator. They also had the MAX 8 simulator a bit down the way. But amazing. I was afraid to touch anything because I didn't want to crash the fake plane.
You'd find a way.
I would.
Find a way, yeah.
But I mean, speaking of the MAX 8, we got to take one up to Brisbane.
Actually.
It was our first time on a MAX 8. I mean, my first time. I don't know if it was your first time.
My first time as well. You were probably going to tee up here. The first thing we noticed is we was basically sat over the engine, and it was very quiet.
Yeah, you could barely hear the engines in that thing. And you know, the cabin was really nice.
Some nice lights as well.
Nice lighting. The device holders on the seats look useful.
It can hold a mobile phone and an iPad as well. Like, it's a very, very clever.
And the charging ports in the seats.
Love a USB, me.
And it had that new plane smell. We love the new plane smell. Unfortunately, on the way back, we were supposed to get on another MAX 8, but due to some reshuffling, we got put on a 737-800.
To be fair, it was good that we actually made it back, because there was all these storms in Sydney. And I think the flight to Sydney before and after ours got cancelled. I'd like to think, because we were actually in the nerve centre and in fact pointed out the flight we were on, they made the decision to save us.
Which is very nice of them, and not at all an evidence of rampant corruption within the industry.
There'd have been hell to pay if that one was cancelled.
We got to see inside the lounges at Sydney and Brisbane airports as well, the Virgin lounges. Brisbane lounge, I will say, much nicer. Yeah. Very, very light and airy in Brisbane. Though the Sydney lounge was decent as well, in my opinion. You did not have as high opinion of the Sydney lounge.
No, I don't think it was. I'm not complaining about going to the lounge, but I would say, because this is not the Beyond lounge. This is the very
the regular lounge.
This is one for the plebs, like me and you. And it was perfectly not. You get a coffee, you can get a cup of tea. I don't think it is a bit of work. Like, Jane, if you are listening, I'm sure she is. I reckon your last act just needs a bit of.
That Sydney lounge was the best airport lounge I'd ever been in.
Because you've never been in an airport
until
lounge
I went
before.
into the Brisbane lounge.
Yes. But also, it's very important to say we talked about the chairman's lounge, the Qantas chairman's lounge, and I asked you a number of weeks ago if you were offered membership of the Chairman's Lounge, you would turn it down because you were a man of integrity. Is that not correct?
Yes.
But when you were offered the chance to go into a lounge, you jumped at it, didn't you?
Well,
what happened to your integrity?
There's a difference there. There is a line that can be drawn. There's a line. You know, there's a difference between going into the regular lounge on a press trip and accepting an invitation to the exclusive super ultra elite lounge, which is not a one-off thing, which is like a permanent thing. Now, if they said, would you like to see inside the Chairman's Lounge once?
Yes.
I might have a look, but I would not accept a membership because that would impugn the integrity of my noble profession. Adam.
I mean, if you had the most integrity, you just deny yourself all lounge access. Surely that is what.
Well, apparently that is a policy at some outlets, or at least you have to declare your involvement. I know that some publications do that. I mean, I'm declaring here. We went into the Virgin Australia lounges at Sydney and Brisbane. They were nice.
They're all right. Other lounges are available.
Other lounges are available, and we would not dream of elevating one lounge above the others.
Right. Anyway, we should probably talk about the news. We don't want Othi on our case again. Yeah. So this is the timestamp where you cut out the nonsense. Jake, it's been a very busy week. Lots of stories happening. What are we talking about first?
Let's start with Virgin. They've had some good news for Virgin with the Qatar Airways bid. The ACCC has given interim authorization for Virgin to start selling these tickets from Australia to Doha, so they can get that underway, so that they can get the flights up and running.
You can actually book a ticket now, or you will be able to.
You can book a ticket. Now, the ACCC hasn't said yes to the flights. Yeah. What they've basically said is, for now, you can sell the tickets to the flights on the proviso that if this does not go ahead, your passengers are refunded or reallocated on suitable alternative flights. Yeah. So it's basically, you can start selling these. We will let you get the ball rolling, but we're not saying yes to the deal yet.
Yeah, because presumably there's a huge lag time. So in order for these things to potentially work, you need to start selling them.
And it has to be, and it's not the ACCC that sort of makes the final decision on the 25% stake. That's up to the Foreign Investment Review Board. I think the ACCC does have say over this wet lease agreement. Yeah. So they have given temporary approval to this. Yeah. Another thing that has happened is that Virgin actually today, Tuesday, as we're recording this, Virgin has put in its application to the International Air Services Commission, the IASC, to get 28 flights per week between Australia and Doha. So this is the government body that allocates the capacity on these international routes. And what was interesting that we noticed is that in the ACCC's initial determination, Virgin had sort of applied for Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane to start the flights in June, with the Perth flights to follow in, I think, November. But in its application to the IASC, that has been changed a bit. Virgin has instead asked for Sydney, Brisbane and Perth in June, with Melbourne to get them last in December.
So this is interesting. I don't want to compliment you too much, but you were the person. In fact, I think you even worked this out while we were recording the podcast. You were the person that worked out the most they could potentially get is 28 flights a week, and that is due to essentially the reciprocal agreement.
It's bilateral,
Yeah, exactly, between Qatar and Australia for what is effectively like a national carrier or for a domestic carrier. So they've taken the maximum allocation they can get. It's interesting that they've made the decision that Melbourne has come later on, or that'd be effectively their lowest priority one. In terms of the ACCC, who've obviously given it interim authorization, I would say it's very likely the ACCC will eventually sign this off, because at its very core, more competition is a good thing. So we kind of knew that was going to happen. The big hurdle was getting through the federal government. Do we have any idea or not when the Foreign Investment Review Board will make a decision?
I don't know about that. I don't know how long the Foreign Investment Review Board typically takes to make decisions like this. But if Virgin wants, I expect it won't take another 6 months.
No.
But if Virgin wants to get these flights up and running, it's got to be by June.
Yeah.
It's got to be probably well before June in order to get all the ducks in a row. But that is up to the FIRB, which is a matter for Treasury. And that's for the 25% stake in Virgin.
Yeah.
I think the wet-leased deal, the ACCC, again, does have some say in that because that affects sort of competition and consumer issues. And, you've also got to consider labour issues. On the subject of labour issues, we've had a bit of an extraordinary intervention from the TWU this week. You might recall earlier in the year there was discussion about the next Virgin CEO to replace Jayne Hrdlicka when she leaves. She had announced her departure in February. Now, one of the favourites was reported an internal appointment, the current Chief Customer and Digital Officer, Paul Jones, who used to be at Qantas. He was at Qantas for about, I think, 10 years and then spent 3 months or so in a particular role before he left, Chief Operations Officer, I think, or Chief Operating Officer. And it was sort of under his watch that at least part of, or some or all of this illegal sackings program took place. This outsourcing of 1,700 jobs, not moving to impugn him or imply any skullduggery on his part, but he was the chief operating officer, I believe, when all of this happened. I'll just
so there's some bad blood, basically.
There's bad blood between Paul Jones and the unions. And so the TWU in June, they sent a letter. So Paul Jones was. According to his LinkedIn, Chief Operating Officer Qantas between September 2020 and June 2021. Before that, between 2017 and August 2020, he was the Executive Manager for Freight and Airports. So he was, Chief Operating Officer in 2020 up to 2021 during the pandemic. And, it was, I believe that he had some involvement in this outsourcing program, at least according to reports. I'm just covering us here. So Paul Jones, there is bad blood between the unions and Paul Jones. The unions do not like Paul Jones. And so the TWU has basically said, he would be disastrous for worker morale if he was put in as CEO. This is what Michael Caine has said. He said that Virgin still has significant work to do to rebuild workforce morale, in particular after these very, very long negotiations earlier this year about new pay and conditions for pilots and for crew. Caine said, quote, clearly in a time of immense uncertainty for Virgin crew around the implications of the wet lease with Qatar, a decision to install Paul Jones of Qantas illegal sackings infamy would be disastrous for morale. That's what they told us. Michael Caine also told the AFR, kind of hinted that the union may revisit its support for this Qatar deal if Jones is appointed. He said, we want to be supportive of the deal and getting Virgin back to long-haul flying. We want to be constructive and work with the airline, but that attitude will change if Bain decides to appoint Paul Jones.
So there's two sides to the story here. If you're the TWU, I can see it from their point of view. They had, there was many figures involved with this illegal outsourcing, but they would say, well, hang on a minute, we don't want the new CEO to be somebody who has upset an awful lot of people across the industry. Obviously, the TWU were one of the people taking this kind of court case, so I can see why they would push against that. But from Virgin's point of view, if I were Virgin, I would almost want to say, who the hell do you think you are to tell us who we're going to appoint as the CEO? And it's also a little bit unfair to somehow insinuate that this one person was completely responsible for the outsourcing there. I'm also old enough and long enough in the tooth in aviation now to remember when the TWU really didn't want Jayne Hrdlicka to be appointed as the CEO of Virgin because she was not hated but very much disliked by the unions when she was at Jetstar, and they pushed very hard against her appointment. And what happened is that Jayne come in, rebuilt relationships very, very quickly, and now has an excellent relationship with the TWU and has done a very good job. So I've sort of seen this happen before. So I do get it from both points of view. I'm sure he would have a very different version of events. I think it's almost to pin all of this on him is a little bit unfair. But you can see there's definitely a bit of tension there.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll be interesting to watch in the months to come, or, perhaps the weeks to come, depending on how long Bain is going to take to appoint a new CEO, because Jayne...
They're taking their time, aren't they? About a year
Jayne
now.
Hrdlicka announced that she was leaving in February, and it is now December and she's still there, which, I mean, good news for Jayne and good news for Virgin, one would say, because she's done a good job. But you have to wonder when this new CEO is going to be decided.
Okay, welcome back. So we spoke there a little bit before about Virgin. What's we going to chat about next?
From Virgin to Qantas, I think.
Nice.
We have we've seen an intervention as well this week, or the potential talk of an intervention from the Transport Minister Catherine King, who has basically supported this notion that Qantas should restart international flights from Adelaide. So Qantas has not really flown internationally from Adelaide, at least on a regular permanent basis since 2013, when they axed a Singapore service. Jetstar does fly from Adelaide to Bali, but Qantas does not fly out of Adelaide in its own right. You can get an Emirates service through Dubai from Adelaide, which is a code share with Qantas. But that's not the same thing as Qantas itself flying internationally from Adelaide. Now, obviously, Qantas flies domestically from Adelaide all over the place. But the Transport Minister said that Qantas, quote, should do better in Adelaide. And she kind of hinted that she would be willing to push Qantas to bring back international Adelaide flights. So she said, certainly I'll raise it with them. I met with Qantas just last week to hear they're bringing more capacity back into the network. And that's an important thing that they've been doing. She said, Adelaide is an airport where it's not restricted in terms of the number of international flights that can come in. And I think it would be great if Qantas did come here, because Adelaide is not considered one of the major, it's a secondary airport, which is one of the reasons that, airlines like Qatar can operate basically as many flights as they like into Adelaide. It's not restricted.
But I mean, I do think this is incredibly unfair on Qantas, because, it's all very well for Catherine King to say, I'll have a word with them, I'll give them a telling off. The reason they're not doing it is because they obviously don't think they can make money, and they're not a charity. Obviously, it's almost a bit of a damning indictment on Adelaide that somehow they don't have the population, or they don't have the means to support these flights. It is slightly ridiculous that Adelaide, which is still a major capital of Australia, and effectively Qantas are not flying an international service there. But they're not. Qantas aren't running. I'm on Qantas' side here. They're not running a charity. And you say it was 2013 when Qantas?
Apparently, yes.
So it was long pre-COVID. This isn't a COVID hangover thing. This just doesn't work.
Yeah, well, this was also an opinion that had been advanced by Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia, who, this was last year in September. He said that this was a disappointing state of play. He said it's been, I think, a decade since Qantas has served Adelaide on an international route. We would love to see that change. He also said, I think sometimes we've seen evidence of Qantas wanting to enjoy the status of being the national flag carrier. If they want to uphold that, I think they should be looking closely at Adelaide.
But this whole thing about them being a national flag carrier, in a sense, it's nonsense now. They are a private company. They are no different, really, from Virgin Australia. We may call them the flag carrier, but in reality, they are not in any way. They're not. They're not really. I know they play that awful propaganda music. I still call Australia home and all this nonsense. But they're not. They're a private, independent company. They can do what they want.
Well, I'm checking now the capital cities. We know that Qantas flies internationally from Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, the major airports. Darwin, they've got their international Qantas Link services, I believe. At least we know that there's at least one coming. They don't have any international services from Hobart. They do not have, and I will double check this now. Yes, Qantas does not as well fly internationally from Canberra. So of the capital cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, they have international Qantas services. Darwin has international services, or at least services coming. I'll double check if they've got any right now. Live research here on Australian Aviation Podcast. You don't get it anywhere else. So Qantas does not Qantas Link does fly to Dili. And those are QF coded flights. And Qantas has always, made a big noise about Qantas and Qantas Link being essentially the same thing. So Qantas Link does fly to Dili, and Qantas Link will be flying from Darwin to Singapore in the A220s. So Darwin does have international Qantas services after a fashion. Adelaide, Canberra, Hobart are the Australian capital cities that do not have international Qantas services.
Well, my message to the government of South Australia is, rather than just go and have an angry chat with Qantas, if you want them to put on flights which are likely not to be profitable, you're going to have to pay for it. You can supplement them.
Well, this. I mean, the states have their various attracting aviation funds. I don't know if South Australia has one itself, but if it doesn't, it might want to consider it.
I would say I don't want to like have a go at the people of South Australia. I really don't like Adelaide. You know how you hate the Gold Coast for no apparent reason. I love the Gold Coast, but I really don't like Adelaide. So tough, really.
It's purely because of that hotel, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. Did we talk about this on the show before? No, we're not going to have a tangent. We're not going to have a tangent. Right, what are we talking about next?
What are we talking about next? Well, if I can get my
more live research.
My tabs in order here. There have been a few stories. We haven't yet talked about Sydney Airport, at least on this particular episode, because last week, finally through Parliament, have passed the Sydney Airport slot reforms, which are the first major changes to the slot system in a quarter of a century or thereabouts. So there's steeper penalties now for airlines that misuse takeoff slots. Carriers will be compelled to increase transparency about their slot use. And there's also going to be this recovery period that will happen after significant disruptions. Which is really good,
because having almost got caught in the Sydney storms, I mean, the problem is that for those of you who are unaware, effectively when there's quite bad weather, particularly when there's crosswinds, Sydney Airport goes down to single runways rather than a parallel runway, which is obviously for safety purposes. But what that means is that a click of the finger, if you get bad weather, Sydney Airport can kind of grind to a halt. And at the moment, because there is a curfew time, that means flights inevitably have to be cancelled just to get some in. If there is this kind of overspill time, then it does allow for there to be an element of recovery. This seems like a very smart idea that makes very good sense. For those people that would be affected by aircraft noise, tough. Aircraft sound great.
Well, this also comes after, and remember, it's the purring of sky kittens,
yes,
Adam.
Yes.
This also came after an independent audit that the government had commissioned. It last week came out and said that airlines, the major carriers, are playing by the rules at Sydney Airport when it comes to slot usage. But they are still kind of exploiting the system within the rules.
So they're not. The accusation is that they are not breaking the letter of the rule, but perhaps the spirit.
The spirit,
of the rule. Yeah.
So this slot audit found that airlines are not scheduling more flights than they can service with their fleets. It also found that slot usage has gone up since the pandemic. In 2022, 17.8% of slots were not utilized. That has gone to 8.1% this year. Still too high, one would say. But that's less than half of the non-utilization rate 2 years ago. The report also did find that the 80-20 rule, which as we may know, requires airlines to use their slots at least 80% of the time or use them, is less effective outside peak hours. It found that airlines that already have slots have a significant advantage in the allocation process because they have first preference to change their own slot times. There was also in the report this idea that airlines can tactically spread out the slots that they don't use. So they can spread them out over different series in peak time. So a series is a set of at least 5 slots at approximately the same time on the same day of the week over a season. And so airlines can basically shuffle around the slots that they don't use in a series so that they're still using the slot 80% of the time. The report said the audit observed patterns of non-utilisation clustered around the 80% use it or lose it threshold on high-frequency routes, especially during peak periods. This spreading out of unused slots across different series ensures they still meet the minimum usage requirement overall, allowing them to keep control of their slots in the long term while gaining operational flexibility. This can help them adjust their schedules to current demand without losing their rights to valuable slots in future seasons. So, as you say, Adam, and as Catherine King said, she said, while there has been improvement in slot use following the pandemic under the current guidelines, there was evidence airlines use the slot system to maintain their existing slots and optimize schedules. More effective regulatory oversight is required to ensure slot allocation is fair, efficient, and transparent. It's as you say, they're playing within the letter of the law, but what the government is arguing is that is not within the spirit of the rules.
Yeah, but there's that old saying, don't blame the player, blame the game. And I'm sure that if you ask Qantas and Virgin, they would say we kind of are within the spirit, but we also have to work within this kind of game, within this 80-20 system. What's very interesting, though, is obviously they've brought in this idea of monitoring that effectively if an airline wants to cancel a flight, they have to give a reason. But nobody seems to have come up with a better idea of how to replace the 80-20 rule. Really, they've looked at it for 6 months a year and gone, there's probably no perfect system. We're trying to make the current system work a bit better. As we said multiple times, the only real solution to this problem is to have more capacity, which we will have when Western Sydney International opens, but that's still a way off. Right, what's up next?
We should probably go for a break, Adam.
Well, hang on a minute. You're not the host. You want to swap round?
You asked me what's next. I made a recommendation.
All right. I concur. Welcome back. I don't even know. Jake, you should probably do this bit. Right. Just you do. You try doing it. It's not easy. It looks easy. Just say welcome back. What are we going to talk about next?
Welcome back, Adam. What are we going to talk about next?
I don't know. That's up to you.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about Jetstar.
This is easy being a host now. Go on.
Let's talk about Jetstar. Jetstar's got its first A320neo in the country. So this is VHA5A, I believe, and that touched down in Melbourne last week. I believe it's already started operating its commercial flights. Now, this is not the A321 Neos that Jetstar has been bringing in. They've got something like 18 of these now. These are kind of a more direct replacement for the existing A320-200s that is already operating on many of its basically all of its domestic routes. Those that don't have the Neos on them. So this first A320neo VHA5A, it's 188 seats. And it's according to Jetstar, it has a nicer cabin, more overhead storage, seat back device holders. We love device holders. In-seat power. It's more fuel efficient. It's fewer emissions, and it will reduce. It will offer more low fares across domestic and international. Stephanie Tully, the CEO, says that they're expecting another 4 A320neos by the middle of next year, and that's part of this ongoing fleet refresh.
Interesting to see if you're Qantas or you're Qantas and Jetstar, you'd think they picked the better side going with Airbus rather than Boeing, because they are now getting aircraft being quietly kind of regularly delivered. And obviously it makes total sense for Jetstar because customers get a better experience, the environment is helped, and obviously they're going to make more money with effectively a better kind of fuel burn. But we'd have to go and have a look around one of these soon.
Absolutely,
just compare the device holders. And the nice lighting.
And we've got that Jetstar has also rolled out its new uniforms that it announced earlier in the year. These uniforms designed by Genevieve Smart.
They've always got those kind of funky names, haven't they, these designers?
They do, yes. But they've got the Jetstar star print all over them, a more relaxed blazer, what they say is a timeless and versatile shirt dress.
What rubbish, timeless and versatile.
But it's sort of this Horizon collection, I believe.
Is it still orange?
There's orange in it.
Yeah.
But the Horizon collection, I believe, is the is mostly so there's the Stella collection, which is the Jetstar star print. There's the Horizon collection, which has the blazer and the tailored shirt, and there's the Pilot collection, which is for pilots.
No, a lot of what they've done there, very, very clever.
Yeah. So we actually, I think, saw a couple of the new Jetstar uniforms as we were coming back from Brisbane.
And don't get me wrong, I do think the uniforms, they are very nice. When I was first alerted to this story on my favourite news source, dailymail.com.au, they were like, this changes everything. A major change is coming.
Well, yeah,
and I was like, not really.
That's the Daily Mail's always saying that, aren't they? Everything's a major change and a horrific scandal with the Daily Mail.
But I mean, it's good to see they've got some new.
You call it your favourite news source, Adam. I think news source is kind of stretching things.
Yeah. What do you reckon we've done with the old uniforms? Because they've probably got to be thrown out now.
Possibly. I mean, maybe the flight attendants are, I don't know, keeping them for.
If you are Stephanie Tyler, I'm sure she is listening. If you've got any old Jetstar uniforms, send them to us. We'd love.
And if you're
a blazer, an orange blazer.
If you're a Jetstar cabin crew member, tell us what you're doing with your old uniforms. We're curious to know.
There you go. Right. Well, what's up next? Are we running low now? Is the well almost dry?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, we can return briefly to Virgin for a bit of a mix-up that happened last year on a flight from Brisbane to Melbourne.
Yes, go on.
So this was from an ATSB report. We don't often report on ATSB stuff on the podcast because it tends to be, either very dry or very tragic. But this is this happened on a 737 that was on its way from Brisbane to Melbourne, and the captain was going to let someone into the flight deck, and reached over to open to activate the cabin the cockpit door switch. I got it out eventually. Reached over to activate the cockpit door switch, accidentally grabbed the rudder trim control and turned that. And so the airplane started to roll to the left.
Oh dear.
The first officer, tried to counter the turn, put almost full right aileron input. They troubleshooted the situation. They found that the switch had been flipped the wrong way. So there was a 42-degree angle, bank angle to the left. Alert from the ground proximity warning system, and unfortunately, a cabin crew member did sustain some minor injuries while stabilizing a food cart.
I like that though, because basically you've been injured, like keeping that food cart safe.
Yeah,
I like that. Great work there. Great work.
That's dedication to the job. So whoops.
Well, I mean, it happens. I mean, it sounds to me like, obviously, this is just a human error thing. Yeah, and they followed the plan and they fixed it.
Yeah,
it's one of those things.
Virgin's implemented changes to the flight deck door entry procedures. They've sort of briefed their flight crews on the event. They've said, if you're flipping a switch, make sure that you're flipping the right one, because what happened was that the pilot saw the switch, reached over, but was looking at the cabin door when he activated the switch, or when they activated the switch. We don't know.
I mean, it could have been if it didn't open like the main door. People weren't like, it wasn't like a door plug incident.
You can't do that in flight.
No.
That's the pressure is I believe it's physically impossible.
Great trivia.
But yeah, I'm looking at the control panel here, and it would be kind of easy to grab the wrong switch because they're right near each other, and they are operated very, very similarly. So it's an easy mistake to make, but fortunately one that resulted in only minor injuries and I don't know, maybe some spilled coffee.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a positive note to end the show on. I think that's pretty good. Right, well, we will finish up. I will thank my co-host, Jake Nelson. Jake, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
And we will be back on this show talking more nonsense next week. But for now, from me and Jake, goodbye.
Goodbye.